The learning curve up front is very steep. Many families tell me that it's just like they were starting all over again with when their child was first diagnosed with diabetes, because there's so much new information to learn and new skills to be using and learning. So it's a big commitment of time and energy and effort at the beginning.
You need to have a little bit of a tech savvy, not a lot, but you need to have a little bit of tech savvy, and you need to be willing to download information so we can analyze and evaluate how you're doing with your diabetes.
It's work. They've already gone through a process, you know, some will go on a pump a year after the diagnosis of diabetes, so they've already gone through a lot of process of learning, and they get tired of always having to learn new things and then be challenged when the things they've learned they have to keep tweaking. So some find the pump, it's a lot to learn, and that sometimes they think, I don't know if I'm ready for that. So we definitely explore where they're also at in their life. Is it a good time to take on that educational component of care, or should you wait a few months, or, you know, so timing's very important with the pump.
I think some people go into it not realizing maybe how much work it is. It's not easier. I don't want people to go into a pump thinking, I'm just hooking this up, it's going to do the testing for me, it's going to do all the work for me, and I won't have to do it. But the pump is only as good as its operator. People still have to think, and they have to make decisions. So it's not easy. It can be very frustrating. I tell my patients when they start that when they start on an insulin pump, that it's like being newly diagnosed all over again. And because it's a lot of work, it's a lot of new learning.
I generally do it with a calculator.
It was extremely stressful that first week because you were checking her like every 2 hours, 3 hours, all night long. My husband and I were doing it in shifts. He'd get the first one, I'd get the next one, he'd get the next one. Because you didn't know when she come off of the needle and went to the pump, and until they got it situated for her, because each pump's individual. It was kind of, I stayed home that first week, and it was all her, all day. So.
It's definitely more expensive than going with insulin injections. The startup cost for the pump is about $7,000, and the monthly cost is between $250 and $300 approximately. So it's a definite, it would be definitely difficult for a lot of families who are, let's say, on social assistance, who have minimum wage jobs, who are struggling to make ends meet, and that's fairly common in our locality.
So there's a lot of cost associated. We're over 300 kilometers to downtown Halifax each way. The parent maybe has to take the day off work, that's cost. The child misses a day of school. Lots of times they have to overnight if the appointment was late in the day and it's winter and there's bad weather, there's meals on the road. So it's not just a cost financially, it's a time cost too to those families. Maybe they have other children at home, they have to have a babysitter or somebody to come in. So there's a lot of organization on a parent's part. So the cost of time is there, not just the cost of money.
Prior to moving towards an insulin pump, you really have to be sure that you can afford it and not just for the short term. So your healthcare team can help ask the right questions, but it does require a private medical plan generally to be able to sustain the cost. Upfront cost, first year for getting on a pump, $7,000 for the purchase. My experience is that most medical plans will cover that 100%, 80 to 100%. The ongoing costs are considerable, and that all has to be factored in and decided prior to moving to a pump. It will be very disappointing to move to a pump and then find out you have to take it away because you can't afford it. So it's one of the prerequisite screening questions that are asked. When you start a pump, there is an increased demand for glucose testing. And that is extremely important in the early weeks to help your healthcare team get the proper settings for your child's pump and management of the diabetes. There is a lot of information coming at you with this testing, so I encourage people to just keep the records that are asked of them and get that back to your healthcare team and let us help you trend it and tweak it.
You have to be very exact on your carb counting, and if you're not exact on your carb counting, you're going to have some issues. If you think that your meal was 90 carbs, but in reality it was 120 carbs, that's 2.5 units of insulin you didn't take for it, which means you're more than likely going to be high later.
You've seen the pumps at camp.
Yeah, and I've always heard them like go off. So I'm like, does that mean they have to take their insulin now?
No.
So like,
No, what the pump is doing is so you can.
So what Matteo and I are talking about is what does he need to do to work towards having a pump? And so some of the things that we've talked about is looking at the blood glucose monitoring and doing that on a regular basis, working hard on his insulin to carbohydrate ratios, talking about how he's going to remember to do his bolus at school, and the idea of maybe setting an alarm to do that, and thinking about the work that's going to happen when he has the pump, the extra work that's going to go with a pump, and is he ready to take that on or not?
One of the other challenges we have with the pump is that if the pump becomes dislodged and the needle comes out, the child won't have any insulin on board, and they could quickly flip into a state called DKA, or diabetic ketoacidosis. So that's another concern that we have.
We usually didn't. We didn't really have any difficulty with the pump. The only thing you might have for difficulty with it is sometimes the pump may fail. Very rarely does it fail, but it's an electronic device. Any electronic device will fail.
Insulin pumps most often work well for people, but there can be problems. So every 2 to 3 days, there's the insertion of the pump site, which is basically a foreign body into your body, and so there can be infections at the site, and there can be issues with irritation or skin irritation or itching where the site is put in, and sometimes there are strategies to deal with that and sometimes there aren't. Depending on the individual's skin type and reactivity, there can be small scars that form, and you can see marks where the sites have been for some people.
Because they're concentrating so much on the carbs or the carbohydrate content of their diet, they tend not to focus as much on the fat content and the protein, which do contribute calories to their diet, but they can gain weight, and that's something that we have to caution them about from the start, that they still have to be cautious that they don't overdo it with their proteins and fats.
Some people find for themselves is that the pump is always there. It's always with the child or the teen with diabetes, and reminding them about their diabetes. And for some people, that's fine, and for others, that's something they don't want to live with all day, every day.
I told another girl if she was going to expect to be getting a pump, that it would probably be the best choice and the best thing since she's had diabetes, and it'd be easier for her to go to friends' houses because she doesn't have to bring the big bag with her, and she could be a normal child again.
The other benefit of the pump is that the teenagers in particular tell me they have a much improved flexibility and an improved quality of life, because they can eat a little bit more when they want to. They don't have to carry the pen in their pockets, and they just have to push a button when they put their carbs in and put their sugar in, and then they can have a snack if they're going out with friends and things. So that flexibility is a big plus.
So life's become a lot easier since going on the pump. We've actually gained really good control over his numbers. Even now, like through the night, if he's running low, I don't always have to try to feed him juice or snacks. It's a little bit easier than I can just go to the pump and say, okay, let's set back how much insulin he's getting. Let's check him again in an hour. Whereas on injections, you'd have to wake them up, give them something to eat, wait 15 minutes, check again, and then you're constantly checking through the night.
This is my hockey jersey. When I play Ludlow hockey, and my number is number 11.
He's very active into sports, so it's allowed us the freedom to, with the pump, you're able to set back the amount of insulin he's getting during that period. So at first we kind of just played it by ear to say, okay, how are his sugars running when he plays hockey? And a few times he'd come off the ice about halfway through and say, I'm hungry, I feel low. So we'd check him and he'd be low and give him a little something and send him back out. So we kind of just realized from there, okay, when he's playing hockey, let's set him back this much and kind of see how it goes. So the pump's great with that, because with injections, he would have had to sit out a little bit longer and wait, and then would have had to have taken him off the ice about halfway through to check his sugars, see how things were running.
You can, just get the approximate value of your average piece of lasagna or, shepherd's pie, just some kind of combination dish.
That's what I had for supper last night.
Did you?
I always say that a person with diabetes, they have the exact same nutritional needs as someone who doesn't have diabetes. And so the same guidelines you would give the entire population, I think, apply here. And so it really is healthy, balanced meals and healthy snacks most of the time, but always enjoy those treats as well. And certainly for older teenagers, often they're up later in the evening, and there become opportunities to have the pizza in the evening, or maybe eating at unpredictable times. Pump therapy can be a great tool for those situations, because you can dose your insulin according to what you eat. So we would want a pumper to be carb counting so that they can dose their insulin for that slice of pizza at 11 p.m.
I don't like to say it's about food, because so many things affect food, and why we eat and why we choose the things we eat. So if somebody is happy, they tend to eat. If somebody is sad, they tend to eat. If somebody's celebrating. So their emotions play a lot into it as well. But with the pump, because of the flexibility, if they are truly carb counting and they decide, they are going to have a little extra than they would normally have, at least with the pump they can count those carbs, put them into the pump, and use the insulin to compensate for the extra carbohydrate to keep their blood sugars well controlled.
With the insulin pumps, I've seen many positive things. I think we're really lucky that there are insulin pumps out there for people. It's another tool that people use to improve their diabetes. So it could be anywhere from, maybe you're on lots of insulin, the long-acting insulin isn't working for you, so trying the pump where you're only on rapid-acting insulin means that for a lot of people I've seen, they need less insulin. I've also seen people who are tired of eating because their insulin's working. So patients that have, I had a patient who just said, I just don't want to eat for 6 hours through the day. And a lot of people want the opposite. Some people want to eat more and be able to give insulin based on what they're eating.
The benefits of the pump, again, are manifold. One beautiful thing is that you don't have to have a needle 4, 5, 6 times a day. And there are some children and adolescents who have phobias or fears of needles, and that can be problematic.
What are your carb ratios?
1 to 12 all day.
So depending on what your needs are, people are happier. And I guess as a diabetes educator, I want my families to be happy. They're dealing with a lifelong chronic disease, type 1 diabetes. So if we as educators can offer them a tool that makes their quality of life better, then I'm all for it. Doesn't mean it's making their life easier, but it makes their life better, and I want them to live their life the way they want to live it, not the way their insulin wants them to live it.
All right, but your reading ended up to be 7.8 after you ate, so still pretty good. That's great, even though you had to estimate your carbohydrate intake. One of the key roles that is important for the dietitian and that we always try to emphasize is that meal times and snack times should be a happy, pleasant time for the families. That the parents and often the mothers don't feel that they're the food police, that decisions that the mother has made or the parents have made, that if the child has a high blood glucose level or a low blood glucose level, that it's not their fault. What we want to guide the families to do is to have pleasant meal times, involve the child in planning their meals and snacks, thinking of healthy eating, so that, yes, my child has diabetes and we have to think about the carbohydrates and the amount of insulin and the exercise and the activity the child is having. But when we sit down to have our meals or we're packing our lunches, that it's, for the most part, a pleasant, healthy, happy experience for the family.